Thank you, sir. I would now like to invite Mr. Soumendu, Chief Product Officer and Head of Tech Strategy at CAMS, and Hariprasad from the Product Management Group. They will demonstrate CAMS FinServe's account aggregator solution for a variety of use cases.
Excellent. Thanks, Neil. A very warm welcome to all of you. Thanks for coming. And before we start with the session on some of the use cases that we believe the account aggregator ecosystem can provide for capital markets, I would maybe take from what Mr. Devendra said, that as an entity and as an organization, today, will we be capable of visualizing what all can be done with this data? Maybe not. So this presentation is just put together to kind of give indicative use cases on what can happen. But yeah, it will be for the entire country to envision what can happen on this platform, because the data will be available for everyone and everyone can make use of it. And before I start this presentation, another thing that Devendra said when he came in, and I found it a funny use case, is that he mentioned that tomorrow it can so happen that you're walking into a car showroom to buy a Volvo or a Mercedes, right? And the person, the sales guy who is talking to you, can ask you for a couple of clicks and your PAN number, and may just not even entertain you in their sales showroom, because you will not have the asset date, because they will have access to that, and that person may know that you don't have the money to buy this car. So that, hopefully that doesn't become the use case. But
how does this mean?
No, I thought it could even become that. Okay, so we have put together a couple of slides, and that's the short agenda of this session. What are the potential use cases? So one of the key things that is currently live on the account aggregator ecosystem is banks. And what banks are giving is actually the entire bank data of the investor, basis consent of entire history, and this is at a transaction level. So one product of ours, which is the bank statement analyzer, what it will do for you is it will basically take that data and divide it into meaningful information, which is basically, it will take all the different bank statements, summarize it, and give you information about what are the total income that you have, what are the total expenditures that you have, and it will categorize it into what is discretionary, what is non-discretionary, and will help you, define what money you have surplus, which you can then use to advise on how to optimize or make optimum use of that surplus money. It can give you advice, or PFMs can give you advice on the spending patterns that you have, whether they are regular, irregular, whether you are an impulse buyer. It can basically create a persona of a user. It can say that whether this guy is an impulse buyer, so we have a lot of us get overdraft limits, and those overdraft limits may not be absolutely useful to us, because many of us may not ever have taken a loan or may not have ever taken an overdraft facility. So this can actually create a persona of a user and can tell the PFM that what is the financial product to advise on, and whether and what is the likelihood that this user is going to avail of those facilities. It can also give you information about the credit to debit ratios, and what is the average spending pattern and all of that, and active monitoring of the statements to see what are the EMIs that are coming up, and around that it can even flag off what are the potential negative events that can happen on your account, which means that if an EMI is coming, it can flag off that whether you have enough money in your account to honor that EMI, and whether you should meet or whether you should do some action to make sure that you don't incur any charges. All of this is possible through the bank statement analyzer that Soumendu, which is the TSP product, has built on top of the account aggregator information that is received and thus can be used by the FIUs. Now coming to this capital market space, which is what we are all excited about, and we believe that in the coming 3 to 6 month window, this data will be available for consumption by the FIUs. Today, this information or a part of this information is available as CAS, and people can make different use cases out of that. But given that this information now can be shared real time, can be shared basis consent, and can be fetched at a frequency that is defined and consented by the user, you can make a lot of use cases around that, which means that you can make advisory on what are the mutual funds that they have invested in, what is the asset allocation, what is the risk allocation, whether this person is optimized in their risk or in their asset allocation or not. You can make use of this data and match it with other APIs to create value adds. Like you can use value research APIs to see that what is the underlying assets in which this investor is invested in. What are the sectors in which this investor is invested in, whether that sector has a positive outlook or a negative outlook, and all of that information now being available, you will be able to give significantly better advice on whether the investments are in the right direction or not. On top of that, given that this information will also, you can match this information along with the bank information to see whether the SIPs that this investor has, whether those SIPs are getting honored continuously, whether the SIPs that are already on, whether they are, whether they can be extended, whether the Cs is coming for an SIP, whether an SIP is coming to an end date. All those use cases are possible and will be possible through the account aggregator platform and the TSP platform that we have built. And putting these two use cases together, which is the bank statement analyzer and the capital markets analyzer, this is the widget that kind of again will give a composite picture of that investor. Again, it will create a persona, and basis that persona, the PFMs can create algorithms and create models basis which they can take usage of the income information, the expenditure information, and the asset information to create models on the exposure, and then can go ahead and give all the advice. The other use case that we keep talking about internally is the flagging of negative events. So today there are a lot of such things that appear in the account statement that an investor may not be actively tracking, and it is possible that through this consent-based mechanism, the PFMs are able to flag off these events in advance. They are able to tell the investor that, okay, 3 days from now, you have a 50,000 rupee EMI coming and it's going to hit your account, and you do not have enough balance. And that can lead to a simple add money, with UPI integration, you can add money to that account and save yourself from that. Or a monthly account balance that you need to maintain in your account. So all kinds of different negative events that can happen in your account with consent and with analysis of the bank statement, you can flag off these events in advance, and you can make sure that the investor does not go through these negative events in their accounts. And this was one use case that we thought is interesting to the MF industry specifically, or capital markets industry, which is as part of the KYC journey. It is critical that you validate the account number of the user, and this is my CAMS screenshot where when the investor is creating the folio, today the entire industry is validating account numbers through penny drop. And there are inherent issues with penny drop. You have to first make sure that the customer's account number is not a joint holder or a multi-holder account, because the number of characters that come back are limited to only 20. The name match algorithms sometimes are not giving great accuracy. All of that can be taken care of by inserting this account aggregator mechanism as part of the journey. So what the user does is it just gives consent, gives 2 clicks, gives you the consent. We are able to match the account number, the last 4 digits, the name that comes back, and we are able to tell in real time that whether this account is valid or not. So these are some of the use cases that we thought that the account aggregator can facilitate today. And as Deirdre said, right, I'll keep going to him, that the number of use cases that this industry and all of us together will come up with is significantly more than what we have put together on this presentation. So we have now a quick demo of how these use cases and how these flows are. So we'll just quickly take you through that. So this is the first one, which is the bank statement analyzer. So basically what's happening is the user is on your platform, on your app. The user has given you consent on fetching the bank statement, and then once the bank statement has come back, we can create a view like this of the user's entire asset base, right? So what is the monthly average balance? What are the total investments that the user has? Liabilities from the bank statement, the average EMI amount, the commitments, the discretionary and the non-discretionary spends, and then categorizing it further into what are the different kinds of spends the user has done, which all of this could be, as I said, used to make sure that you're giving them in-time, real-time advisory on what to do, and just-in-time advisory on what to do and what are the kind of events that or what are the kind of actions that the user can take to optimize their money. Yeah, so this is how the CASA analysis can happen, which is it can show that in the last 3 months or 6 months or 12 months, what is the debit to credit ratio. Again, this is useful for the PFM to figure out what is the debit to credit ratio that the investor maintains, and basis that you can give advice on what is the loan and how much loan you can give this investor. Average EOD balances, you come down. Different bank accounts, what are the total amount credited, debited, and all of that. And you can do further analysis on what are the debit and credit transaction counts, what are the debit and credit amounts, usual amounts, and all of this bifurcation is available today, and it can significantly be enriched, but whatever are the use cases that the industry sees. But today we have this as a working model, which can be deployed and can be used as is today for you to give advice. Now going to the second use case, which is the money managing use case. So this will just give you a sense of what the journey on an application will look like. So if you go to explore now, this is our account aggregator journey today. So if you click on one of the banks which are listed, we give the FIP this request with the bank, and the investor sees this screen. So the mobile number is basically the key with which the accounts are fetched, and it is going to basis that OTP. The discovery happens that what are the different accounts which are linked to that mobile number. All those accounts are listed here. The consent parameters which are there on the top of the block, the user can see what are the consent that the user is giving, what is the frequency of the data fetch, what is the reason for which the data is requested for, what is the data live. All of those values are given on the top that the investor can see, and hopefully we will be able to stop abuse of these consent by making sure that the investor has visibility of what the investor is giving consent for. Once the investor sees all of that and agrees to link these accounts, you click the FIP, in this case the Axis Bank, will now send a OTP to the investor's mobile number that is linked. The investor puts in that mobile number. The investor can add more accounts if they want through this number or a different number, so that's also possible as part of the journey. But if the investor has only that account number and all of that is fetched, Yeah, or you can discover. So this use case was just to show that as part of the same journey, the investor can discover mobile account numbers from the banks, can discover mutual fund accounts, and can match and can give consent for all of that in the same journey. So in HDFC mutual fund, what are the different folios that the investor has? Again, you can select, and now there will be an OTP from, in this case, from the RTA side to link those accounts. And now all of this have been, linked. The consent request has been given, and then as investor submits consent, the investor goes back to the calling application, and now we can present a view of the total asset and liability situation of that investor, which is our money manager application. So you can now see that if you click on income, the bank statement analysis that I talked about in the first slide, it has categorized it into what are the different fixed incomes, which is regular income that comes in his account, his or her account, salary, rental, interest on savings and all, and additional income that has come for that particular month or that particular duration. All of that categorization is possible. In the investment sides, this has come from the capital markets part, and which is what we believe will be a great use case. So it can categorize that what are the mutual fund holdings, what are the stock holdings, other holdings, and if you go into one of them, we can show a series of data points that is interesting and useful to the investor. So now, given that the investor has given consent of the folios of HDFC, in this screen they can see that, okay, if the investor had given two folios, and if nominee information which is critical, and we were talking about it just before the evening around the regulation, if nominee information is critical and one of the folios do not have nomination, it can get flagged off right there, and then it can be added right there, right? Now, it will give information on that in HDFC mutual fund, what are the total amount invested, what is the asset growth that has happened, how many units are marked in the lien, how many units are free. All of that information is available for people to consume, and basis that give advice on, right? Go to SIP side, it again shows that again. So we know that from this information that what is the SIP date. On that date, if it is close by, the PFM can advise and mention that, this folio has an SIP upcoming and your account does not have enough money. So you can give a low balance alert and ask the user to add money. It also gives some information on number of active SIPs that are currently there, what is the total commitment per month, last 6 months, last 12 months, how many bounces have happened. So a multitude of use cases that can be thought of by assimilating and collating this information and presenting it in a consumable fashion. And as I was saying, that the other use case is taking third-party data like data from value research and even adding more value to the core information coming. So the mutual fund information you have, but underlying what is the sector allocation, what is the asset size allocation, so large cap, mid cap and all of that. So what is the risk exposure of this user, whether it matches with the asset allocation, and then you can give advisory on what else the user can do and where the user can invest in. And this is the third part, which is the expense categorization. Again, we spoke about it in the bank statement analyzer part, that what are the discretionary expenses, which means that this is the money that will always go out of that investor's account, and what is non-discretionary, which will again help you create a persona of this user and say that, this is the money around which you can give advice and make sure that the investor is, using this money to maybe grow his or her wealth rather than spending or impulse buying. The third use case that we spoke about was this negative balance charges. So again, you go to set alert, and once you have set that alert, you can again analyze. So it's the same journey for the user. The user goes, gives consent. It's a 2-click process. You discover the account, it's the same two-click process, you give consent for these accounts, you link them, you put the OTP that the investor you received from Axis Bank, which is the FIP in this case, and once this data comes back or the consent comes back, you can now look at this account and say that you analyze the bank statement and see what is the minimum balance there, and what are the different EMIs that are going to come, and you add them and you can act on that alert. And yes, you can integrate directly with UPI to make sure that you are funding the money directly from that application and make sure that you are saving yourself from those negative events. And the last one that we quickly wanted to give a demo about is this CAMS use case of account verification. Today the account verification, by the way, is not consent based. We push a 1 rupee and sometimes we get complaints around that. So this is completely consent based and very simple because it is in the flow. You have the account number that the investor has seeded. You click on verify account. Now you understand that we are passing this consent request with the bank and with the account number. And as the investor puts in the OTP, right, that account number will either get discovered or not get discovered basis whether it is linked to him or her, his or her account or not. And once you have given discovery, you have discovered and you provide link, so provide consent, and you put the OTP. These two steps make sure that your account actually gets verified on the fly. And as part of the journey, you are not only doing account validation, but you are seeking and getting consent for doing all the analysis that we spoke earlier about. So in one single two-step journey, you are able to not only get the account verification done, which has its benefit, but get the information, get it frequently, get it at a periodic basis, and make sure that you are ready to give advice to this investor on the different PFM use cases. That's all we had prepared. Happy to take any questions that the audience may have, or we can have it later as well.
So, is this facility or this data availability will be through an API mode or it's more into an app based?
So this is all APIs. The account aggregator is an API based architecture. TSPs, as we spoke about earlier, basically simplify the integration of those APIs and take care of a lot of the governance part, which is making sure that your data life is taken care of, your data is purged, your encryption, decryption is taken care of. All of that work is done by the TSP in the background, but this entire architecture is API based. But one point is that the consent, the action of giving consent has to be on the account aggregator platform, and so even if you are integrating with APIs or SDKs, those screens that we showed of the account aggregator will become part of your journey.
The consent process has to be broadly the same.
The consent process is, yeah, it can. Please.
So you mentioned, so when you are analyzing the mutual funds, you have breakup by sector and market cap, etc. So do you have already data sharing agreements in place with, say, a banking search or a Morningstar to pull that data where you get?
Yeah. So with Value Research to a different entity, we already have the APIs, and this can again be integrated as part of the capital markets use case. The capital markets use case is something that we are talking about. The caveat is that SEBI has not given out a circular yet, but we believe that the circular is like literally around the corner. And it will come out like any weekend, like if not this, then next. And we have the back-end mechanism already ready, because in capital markets there are only 4 players who will provide the data. There are 44 AMCs who are principals of this data, but the data sharing mechanism will be facilitated through RTAs. On the stock side, it is actually facilitated only by the depositories. So as the regulation comes, we have the backend system already created and ready to facilitate all of this that we were just demonstrating. Please.
consent-based journey which you have mentioned for account verification in mutual fund, will it eliminate the actual banking document requirement which is there with CAMS in mutual fund?
Sorry.
So right now, if any account which needs to be opened in mutual fund, the transaction requirement is a hard copy of bank statement or a scan copy of bank statement or copy of check is required. Will the AA eliminate the requirement or it's going to continue? Because that is where the penny drop is not. That is where the penny drop is not there in everything.
Correct. So today, if you look at most of the platforms which open an account in mutual funds, most of them have done away with asking for a check or a bank statement. They ask you when the penny drop fails. The penny drop fails because today the penny drop return response is only 20 characters and the name matching is not very easy. So we have seen between 15 to 20% cases in which the account statement is asked for. But this is a significantly more robust way of validating the account. So the short answer to your question is yes, it will do away with asking for a bank statement. And it is more robust than a penny drop based account validation, because in this case you are getting the PAN, you are getting the account, your last 4 digits of the account number as well as the name. Please.
Yeah, this is a restricted answer, but I just want to be concept from my mutual fund investments and not from a banking and
Absolutely. So so you can, so what happens is, if you look at the flow, right, you can define your flow. You can ask the user to choose a financial information provider, which can be a mutual fund company or a bank or a set series of them, or you can just with the account mobile number discover all of them. But the ability to give consent specifically for a use case and for a FIP is in the hands of the investor. So you can choose.
yeah, so for my mutual fund advisor, my financial advisor, I just want to restrict the access only to investments and not anything else.
Which is completely possible and can be devised as part of the journey itself. Sorry.
I have a few questions. One is that do we have the capability of pulling data from credit card? Because if you don't have that currently, then your income expenses may be a little off in terms of completeness. Second is, are they live with joint accounts and how does consent work? And the last one is in terms of my liabilities that I have with banks in my individual capacity. Do those accounts also come, like my personal loan, auto loan, home loan? Some of those liability accounts to give a more accurate, holistic picture of my financial information, especially where it's a lending use case or an NBFC where I want to see the individual's exposure not just through CIBIL and a CIBIL ranking, but actual exposure and use that information. Is that available? Is that in the pipeline? What are the timelines?
So I'll try and answer all three, and I hope I'll remember all the three questions. So first, the credit card part. If you look at the master directive from RBI, there are 23 FI types that have been identified and requested to be participants of this account aggregate ecosystem. While I answer, I look at Mahesh and I look at him and see that he is the founder and of this entire architecture. So please correct me if I'm wrong. So credit cards are part of the.
So about 15 days ago it was dropped.
Oh, okay. So credit cards then they were initially part of the directive, but today they are not. But having said that, the ecosystem is such nicely developed and designed that it is extensible, which means that today you will get X information from, let's say, account aggregator. You can write on top of that and merge it with somebody like a CIBIL, right? And create a much more holistic picture of the investor. And basis that can make these decisions. So the credit card information may not come directly, but it can come to you all the same. The second part of the question, or the second question was whether joint holders are there today or not. The short answer is no. Today, this entire ecosystem is single holder based. The joint holder is something that we are working with Soumendu on, basically on devising that what is the flow for consent. Because now multiple people are there, how long should we wait? If first person has given the consent, till when should I wait till the second consent has come? What is the life and all of that? So that's in the works. The third use case, which is lending part, whether other parts of the of your account will come or not. So today from the bank side, what is live is FDRD and savings. But having said that, this algorithm that we spoke about, right, it can analyze your bank statement and can figure out that which of these outgoes from your bank are going to service EMIs, going to service loans. From that we can triangulate and maybe come to that answer. It's not a straight answer today, but because bank statement mentioned the loan account servicing number and all of that, the bank statement analyzer is capable. And that's why when we showed that what are non-discretionary expenses and loan servicing is one of them, we are able to make that judgment and pass on that information. Sorry, somebody here. Please.
For capital market use case, let's say as a HNI I have investment across multiple AMCs. So as a consent, is it like one by one, or I can give consent for all the fund houses together? That's one question. Second question for capital market again, what all kind of data I am getting? So I am getting only the holdings of the fund that I am having, or also I am having the transaction data, which can I utilize for calculating performance and all, and how historical data, and if let's say it's not there today, what is the timeline that we are seeing to get that kind of data? And third is, let's say I am investing through different distributor or advisor, but as my care statement, maybe that data is, I don't remember is there or not, but is there a way where I can find out that I have this much holding, but I have invested it through like this route, and that route?
Yeah. So I'll start with the second question, right? That what kind of data comes? So every FI type of financial entity type, 3 data parts are defined, right? One is called profile, which is basically profile information of the investor, your name, address, whether nominee is registered in your account or not, all of that. Second is summary, which basically gives you information about what is your investment, what is your current balance, and what has been your growth, returns, all of that. And the third is transaction, right, which is a row by row listing of entire transaction history done by you. The consent mechanism gives you the ability for the FIU, the information seeker, to define what is the period for which you want this data. And it also gives you the mechanism to ask that whether you want this data one time or you want it at a periodical fetch, and for how long, right? And as part of the consent, you also have to mention that why are you using this data and how long will you want to store this data, which is the data life concept, right? So to answer your question, all of that is possible. You can get access to transaction summary and entire row by row transaction for the investor, irrespective of the investor having transacted through any forum, right? So if an investor has transacted through 3 distributors, but with this one consent, the investor can give you access to all the investment done across distributors, right? The second or the first question that you asked, which is multiple consent part. Now we are exploring that. So when banks went live, usually an Indian investor has 2-3 bank accounts, but it is understood that in the capital market, specifically with mutual funds, an investor has invested across maybe 5-6 mutual funds. And so giving consent one by one for every mutual fund may become very cumbersome. So we are discussing with both Sehmati as well as our sector regulator on whether RTAs can be FIP gateways. So if the investor chooses, let's say investor has investment in 5 funds, wants to give consent only for 3, but all those 3 funds are serviced by one RTA. So can the consent be a single consent? We are discussing that, it is not confirmed yet, but we will maybe hopefully be able to reach there. I'm not sure, but we are trying to move in that direction. That was the third question.
Last question was distributed values.
Yeah, so you will have access to everything, irrespective of from where the investor has done his investment, his or her investment.
Identifier of distributor or identifier of the distributor, not, I think that was his question.
Yeah.
It is your investment.
Yeah. So it
Gas,
It's a gas.
gas, correct.
It's part of the profile.
Gas,
no ARN number,
Part of the profile.
all of that.
What is the distributor?
all the year.
Correct. So that, I'm just going back to what David said. That we believe is part of this great data democratization, right? So today, whatever inefficiency exists in the advisory space, we believe this will be a great leveler, because whether you have gotten great advice or not, right, and whether you have invested in the right funds or not, and whether a distributor is better than the other distributor, the platforms will be able to show all of that in white light, right? And then the investor can make that choice, or an informed choice, on whether he or she wants to continue in that or wants to move. Yeah, Anish is showing his watch. So thank you. Thanks for